data and historical data, but I was interviewing Hungarians. People in the government, yes, but also just people out in the countryside, regular people, plumbers, decorators, that kind of thing. And person after person said to me that the rhetoric coming out of the United States reminded them of their Soviet era. They were occupied by the Soviet Union for 46 years until 1991. So this is something very fresh in their memory, living under communism, living under Marxist oppression, living without freedom. And that's a gut punch, right? Being told that your country, land of the free, reminds them of their Soviet era.
We hear a lot of different things about Hungary. Something that I've heard a lot about is very interesting family policies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so promoting family, promoting increased childbirth in the society and so forth. Very, very interesting to me. We also heard here that could be a bit heavy-handed.
Yeah, the overall leftist media is very antagonistic towards Hungary. Our own U.S. ambassador is very antagonistic towards Hungary. Hungary has dug their heels in against the woke agenda. They came through 46 years of communism, still a Christian nation, still a freedom-loving nation. They spent 1,000 years actually with occupation of the Mongols, the Ottoman Turks, the Habsburg Empire, then the Nazis, then the Soviets, all along maintaining their Christianity, their love for their family, and their love for their country. And the European Union raises its head, and they will not tolerate the top-down decision-making of where the European Union is going right now. Do you know the philosopher, the great conservative writer, Sir Roger Scruton? Do you know him? Well, he's well loved in Hungary. He actually was part of the underground, of course, during the Soviet time, bringing books and knowledge and networking people during the Soviet occupation. He had a statement, a quote that I put in the book, that was basically saying, even though the wall has come down, even though the Soviets have retreated, in its place has come this top-down decision-making body, the European Union, that is still trying to hold on to people's thoughts, tell them how to think, take away their sovereignty. So to go back to your original question, Hungary is determined not to lose their sovereignty again, even if it's to a body that seems more civilized, shall we say, the European Union and the Biden administration. And there are three main issues that the Biden administration and the EU are angry with Hungary about. It has to do with the radical gender theory. The EU has tried to push transgender ideology into classrooms and curriculum there. The referendum done with the citizens, in that the citizens overwhelmingly said no. The Biden administration is also very angry about that and has tried to push back a lot. Our ambassador goes on social media quite regularly, calling Hungary a LGBT hater or whatever because of this. But their position is that it's up to the parents to teach their children. It's up to the parents to deal with ideas of transitioning, etc. The second issue that they are maligned for is they are not going to have mass influx illegal immigration in their country. They tried that in 2015 during the Arab uprising when the EU wanted them to do it. They had to declare a national emergency because of all the people going through this small landlocked country of 10 million people. We can talk about that more if you'd like. And then the third issue is that they have been calling since the beginning for peace negotiation between Ukraine and Russia. They could not handle the sanctions against Russia because the vast majority of their energy was coming from Russia. Even their infrastructure was Soviet era. So again, lots to talk about in that. But those are the three The three reasons you hear that Hungary is a democratic backslider, aligned with Russia, etc. All kinds of bad stuff in the press, but it boils down to these 3 points.
A month ago, they established an all-weather comprehensive strategic partnership for the new era, all capitalized, as per the Chinese regime's propaganda press, so to speak, right? So that is surprising to people. Any quick thoughts on this?
Yeah. Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on that. In fact, I have a whole chapter in the book on this. And I've been very honest and open with the government officials and the friends that I've talked to in Hungary. They know how I feel about this. They disagree with me. But let me go back a little bit and try to explain what their mindset is, whether or not I agree with it. So for 1,000 years, like I said, they have been in this landlocked area with all kinds of different peoples coming in and conquering them and taking them over. So if you talk to them, you understand that paramount in their policy and way of thinking is survival. So in fact, the chapter in the book is called Balancing Between the East and West. That's what they've been doing for a very long time. They became a Christian Western kingdom, like I said, over 1,000 years ago. But they are a people that came from the east, from the Ural Mountains. It's debatable which side. People don't know. In fact, the origins of Hungarians it's very murky. But they came from there, moved west until eventually they became this kingdom. So survival, like I said, is paramount in their mind. They have been getting economic investment from the Chinese. It's helping their economy. And I'm sharing with you what was told to me by some of the government officials there.
They're a significant part of the Belt and Road Initiative. That's right.
That's exactly right. And as this money is coming in, you have to understand that the European Union has sanctioned them millions, perhaps actually billions of dollars because of the 3 issues that I explained to you. The administration here in the U.S. is supportive of that. I'm not saying we're sanctioning them, but we're antagonizing them. Stupidly, they're our allies, and the EU and we are making it harder for them to work with us. At the same time, they're getting economic investment with the Chinese. Judith Varga at the time was the Minister of Justice. I interviewed her for the book, and she said to me, it's very hypocritical. When the Germans get investment from the Chinese, you don't hear about this. When the Chinese are the second largest foreign landowners in the United States, or foreign debt in the United States, you don't hear a lot about that. They look at it as very hypocritical. My stance is I think we are both playing with fire in this. It was said to me by many different Hungarians, the Chinese, it is in their interest to infiltrate the United States, basically to spy on you, to try to take over your institutions, et cetera, et cetera. But they're not interested in that with us. Also, they don't try to change our morals. I did say to them, I think that that's a little bit naive. That's in my book also, that perhaps they're not doing it now, but I believe that they will. I think the Chinese look long term. For us, 50 years is long term. With the Chinese, it's 100 or more years, right?
So, Shay, we're going to take a quick break right now, and we'll be right back. Last Warning to the West. Let's talk about the family policy, because this is something that I like. What has been successful, and what is what are they doing actually? I mean, it's fascinating because this isn't something that's really been done very much.
True. Well, in a nutshell, the more children you have, the more tax cuts you get. They also have subsidies and loans for housing or bigger cars, the more family that you have. And it has actually been very supportive of the Hungarian people. They have reversed the decline. I think the fertility rate was like 1.2 when they started 10 years ago. Now it's like 1.6. So it's not at the point of replacement yet, but it is headed in a good direction. A year ago, they had the highest marriage rate in the European Union. they've cut abortion in half. I think as time goes on, you will see more and more benefits.
That policy alone is responsible for the cuts in the half cut in abortion. I mean, that's obviously very significant.
Well, there's other things to it, and like I said, people can get subsidies, loans for a bigger home, loans for a bigger car, these kind of things at good interest rates. So it's a mixture, really.
Okay, fascinating.
It supported people so they feel like that they can get married and have children. And actually, what I found interesting is that there are more working mothers now. So women that have children are also working, whereas before they didn't have the support to have the children that they wanted to have.
Tell me a little bit about Hungary, because we hear about it, but like how big is it? You've said that it has 1,000 years of basically of being a Christian nation, but just kind of give me the outlines, because I think I even only know a piece of that.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Well, I think what's interesting, actually, you made me think about this when you said that, is in 1920 with the Treaty of Versailles, which what came out of that was the Treaty of Trianon. Hungary actually lost 2/3 of its territory, lost about 3 million of its people. So because it was one of the countries that was technically aligned with Germany, because it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at that time, it was penalized under the Treaty of Versailles, and Wilson's right to self-determination did not extend to Hungary. He had said actually that they were going to draw the lines during this time of the different territories, or the countries redraw lines in favor of the population. Well, that didn't happen with Hungary. They, like I said, they lost 2/3 territory, like 3 million people, and it really weakened Hungary, which led, I believe, to the Nazis being able to occupy it, and them really being in that vice grip between Germany and between the Soviet Union.
How many people in the country?
Now there's 10 million, but Orban has extended citizenship to the people that were lost during that territory. And I don't know the ins and outs of how they get it. I guess they have to prove that they're part of that line. So I think the citizenship is actually greater. So that's been kind of a source of contention. People have said that Orban did that in order to bolster his election polls. So the Treaty of Trianon obviously is a huge sore spot. Even today, it's a big deal. I mean, it's a huge loss of territory and of people. So to them, Hungary is not just inside the borders.
Sure.
It is those Hungarians as well that they lost in 1920. So it's been 100 years ago now.
10 million people is not a huge population for a distinctive group trying to keep its identity.
And can I tell you something about that that's very interesting? Throughout all this time where they were moving from the east to the west, and throughout all this occupation, they kept their unique Hungarian identity and their language. I mean, who else in the world speaks Hungarian? Nobody.
It's probably the only language in the world that's more difficult than Polish. There's a debate going on about that. Yeah.
Well, I had the pleasure about a year and a half ago of interviewing for a Counterpoint Institute event Peter Szijjártó. He's the foreign minister for Hungary, and he said that they considered Hungarian code, because whenever they were speaking it, they were speaking code because nobody else could speak it. So I guess that's an advantage for them. And I went to do research for the book. I didn't go with a goal in mind. That's the kind of research I do. I wanted to find out why Hungary had, and how had it retained its unique identity and its love for its national sovereignty. Orban, Prime Minister Orban, was one of the fighters that helped push the Soviet Union out of Hungary. And the Hungarians have really maintained that love of their freedom, of their family. Even during the occupation, when they had to take the Christian symbols off their walls and put the the pictures of the communists up there. Like I was told by these older gentlemen that I interviewed that in their families they would go home and they would still practice their religion and they'd be taught, love of country and here's how we do things. And then they'd go to school and they'd pretend to go along with the Soviet ideal. But it was just curious to me how this country retained all this and now is this little country that's been catapulted to the world stage because it's pushing back on the European Union, sanctioned by the European Union, maligned in the press, hated by the Biden administration. And I just thought that was fascinating. Like you said, 10 million people. And, a lot of people know about Hungary.
You believe that Hungary has something to teach. You talk about that very deliberately in your book. What can we learn here?
Well, I think the overall lesson from Hungary that we can learn is really ideological in that freedom is not free, and we are only a generation away from losing our freedom. And to have an awareness of the Marxism that is creeping into our country and to stand against that. As far as policy goes, I don't think everything in Hungary's family policy, where it may border on social welfare, is for America. But I do think things like income tax cuts for bigger families is a good thing. I think that's a really good thing.
Instead
The
of
social
taxing them,
ideology of America is being held hostage by the mainstream media, because I don't believe that the majority of Americans think that pushing radical gender theory on children is a good thing. So in terms of policy towards that, maybe we can learn something from them, because something that I have spent several years working on in Congress is trying to explain the dangers of things like the Equality Act and legislation, because what it basically does, it essentially erases the lines between men and women. Title IX right now, the Biden administration has added that gender identity part to Title IX, which means that men, biological men, can use the same entitlements that women have had in scholarships or on sports teams. You can take that wider. During Obama, biological men were using domestic violence shelters that were funded publicly by the government. The other thing is a pushback against the international organizations. Trump did this. Trump defunded the UN agency that Biden refunded UNRWA. Trump had already defunded it because you know what? We already knew it was connected to Hamas and it was anti-Semitic. Trump did a lot of things like that, like pulling us off the Human Rights Council that allows China to sit on the council. Secretary Pompeo described China as the greatest human rights abuser, definitely, of our time period, especially with over 1 million Uyghur Muslims in these re-education camps. So they have also taken a stance, like I said, against the European Union and other international organizations. And I think we can take a lesson from that.
Specifically something that I remarked on reading your book is their emphasis on, civics and national identity. And of course, they have this 1,000 years of history, which they, hark back to. America doesn't have 1,000 years of history, but it has a very powerful idea, which was, what created that unifying vision,
right,
realized in the Constitution or manifest in the Constitution.
Here's what's very interesting. One of the 4 steps or 5 steps of Sovietization is to kill all the civic associations, which they did in Hungary. I think they closed down like 5,000 civic associations in order to break the unity between people, because what better way to control, right? So it's interesting that you bring that up, because it is very important to them, their national identity, their pride in their country, and the fact that nationalism to Hungarians is not a dirty word. Nationalism, of course, we know has been perverted, especially by the Nazis. But if you just take it for its meaning, it's pride in your country. And going back to Roger Scruton, he explained that nationalism was really what made democracy work because you come together and you agree on how the economy is going to work. You agree on how the law is going to work. You agree on how society is going to work. That's a sense of collaboration within a nation or nationalism. And I think you're right. I think we can learn from Hungary in that. And that's a lot of where their power comes from. We need to remember that America was built on principles, on an idea that has worked for us, right? For a long time now. Have we had problems? Yeah, we've had problems. Certainly slavery was a huge problem. I believe that we were given the founding documents and that idea to work through these problems, and that's what we need to continue to do as challenges come up.
Well, Shay Bradley Farrell, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thank you, Jan. It was an honor to be with you.
Thank you all for joining Shay Bradley Farrell and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Janja Kellick.